Listeners, imagine a skyscraper towering above the city skyline. What allows it to stand tall, enduring the winds and storms? It's not just the bricks and mortar, it's the intricate structure and framework of steel, the unseen scaffold that provides support and stability. Similarly, within our bodies, there exists an internal scaffolding, a framework of bones, muscles, and connective tissues that holds us upright and keeps us moving. And today we delve into this fascinating realm of biomechanics and emotional well being, exploring how understanding our internal body structure can lead to profound healing and transformation. And joining us today is Victoria, who is a renowned expert in biomechanics and holistic healing. And a quick introduction to Victoria. Victoria is the founder of the Excel System and Get Into Your Body methodology. With accolades such as best-selling author and Federation of Holistic Therapists Tutor of the year 2023, Victoria's mission is to empower individuals to understand the intricate connection between biomechanics and emotional well-being. Welcome, Victoria.
Hello, thank you, Pulkit. It's lovely to be here with you.
Pleasure is all mine. Pleasure is all mine. And Victoria, before we start, the journey of question and answer and demystifying biomechanics, why don't we hear about your journey, how the journey has been, what got you introduced to biomechanics, and how has it been going for you so far?
Well, I mean, it's been a very long journey, a very long journey. I think since I was a child of living in a body where there was a lot of pretty scary and traumatic stuff going on around me, potential violence, suicide, all those different aspects of trauma that could hit a body. Yeah, if we go thinking about the buildings, all the hurricanes, all the storms, everything, even a few earthquakes, right, going on underneath my feet. This didn't set me up well for adulthood at all. And by the time I was 20, I was practically in a coma with no one really knew what was wrong with me. They looked inside my stomach. They then discovered I had celiac disease, which is it's interesting because the celiac plexus is actually in the center of our autonomic nervous system. So clearly my body had reacted. Very possibly, who knows, that could have come down the generations. It could have been what had made my father so unstable, his mother so unstable, both emotionally and physically. But so three suicides basically: my grandmother when I was 8, my grandfather when I was 16, and my father when I was 25. So by the time I was 25, I was literally on my knees. By this point, simply to try and manage my chronic emotional trauma and pain. I was an addict. I smoked marijuana pretty much every day just to try and numb out. That was the only way I knew really to deal with pain. Okay. I think, as I said to you, I traveled to India in the end, and I spent quite a long time in India. So it's lovely to be doing this with you. And I think I got to the point where it was so clear for me that using drugs, running away, okay, and the medical world, none of it was working. Okay. And when I looked at my generational history with the suicide coming down, it felt very, very scary. And it was literally like, God, please, someone just show me, how do I stay alive? How do I live in this body? How do I learn to live in this body as a happy person? Because it really didn't add up to me at all. This thing of being happy and feeling healthy just didn't show up for me historically. And that was really the beginning. I hit a crisis point, as I'd mentioned to you, when I was in India. I started spending time with Tibetan doctors. I then continued traveling for a while. And I realized, as a 25, 26-year-old, that actually there were some other approaches to health. And I would say I spent the next 10 years on my own healing journey, actually. I did start training in things like reflexology, massage, aromatherapy, very, very basic things, lovely touch therapies that can have a big impact, but are not necessarily deeply educational in terms of what's really going on with the different systems of the body, but they're great in terms of activating, some kind of healing for the body.
Yep.
And then I had 2 children, and that was a real calling for me to deal with the addiction that I still had. Yeah. So it was very, very difficult at this point having children, but still not really having the correct support to help me process the very trauma that was really making me continue to self-medicate, because you continue to create relationships and situations based on the trauma patterns that you have historically. You don't wake up one day as if everything's disappeared. It's not like that. And so I think my story from there was really as a mother at a rock bottom, trying to deal with relationships with myself, with my husband, with being a mother. There was a calling to go much, much deeper and to truly understand not just how to cope with the symptoms of pain, emotional and physical pain, but what was continuing to cause me to need to deal with those symptoms, if that makes sense. And so I then went on, I did a degree in clinical massage. So I went and I learned the body. I learned pathologies. I learned, not just what a muscle is, but where a muscle where all the different muscles attach, where the joints are, what direction different parts of the body are meant to move in, but this was still all on a potential client where they're coming to me for me to fix their pain. Okay. And that was great. I was very, very good at that. I think I can honestly say, never short of clients, loved what I did, just loved what I did. And had also, by this point, when I really started working with clients, really dealt with any addiction. I always had a thing. I never wanted to put my hands on people's bodies if I didn't feel like, a fairly pure and clean channel from that respect. So I didn't even really start working with clients until I'd really resolved all of that for myself. That was, absolutely essential to me. And then as I continued to work with clients, after a period of time, I could have gone on to become a teacher. So to teach other clinical massage therapists, that's where I thought I was going to go with this, because I always loved the idea of being a teacher and sharing knowledge, not just one-to-one in clinic. And then I discovered a book called What the Foot. And the moment I saw that book, it was by my teacher, Gary Ward, and it was really looking at the biomechanics of the foot. And if anyone at any point actually sees a picture of this podcast, here is a foot. A foot has 26 bones in it, and it has 33 joints in it. And what I had noticed was no matter what learning I continued to do in terms of massage and touch therapies, reflexology, which was actually one of the first things I ever did, continued to be an extraordinarily powerful tool. But I didn't understand why. And I certainly didn't, I wasn't satisfied, in terms of reflexology with the why it worked. So when I saw this book, What the Foot, by my teacher, Gary Ward, it was like, boom, I just had to go and train with this guy because it made sense to me, but I didn't know why. So I went and trained with him, and basically when you start learning your biomechanics, it can feel extraordinarily chaotic in your body because you are basically changing deep ingrained unconscious patterns of movement. But whilst moving through the chaos of that, that transformation, I began to notice something which they weren't teaching in the room in that course with Gary Ward. I began to notice, both from my personal experience and then that with clients, that as you realign the biomechanics, people's emotional state can profoundly transform. Not always. And it's not at that point, it wasn't a predictable art because I didn't fully understand what was going on. But I saw it in myself. And what was even more curious was that it began to become clear that as people transformed or realigned and found their boundaries in correct range of movement with their biomechanics, as I was in my own life, literally their life would start to profoundly change. Whether it's their relationships with people, their relationships with habits, their sense of where they're going in the world. It became clear, number one, in my own life, Yeah, literally, as I learned to stand on my own 2 feet correctly and to put one foot in front of the other in correct biomechanic alignment, it was almost like that I was not in alignment with in my life had to fall away.
Mhm.
So there is some, I would say it's like the animal brain. Yeah, the parasympathetic animal brain is hanging out in our bones and joints. And now what I say to people is your bones will outlive your thinking mind and beating heart. Your bones are just extraordinary. They are the needles. They are the needles of your body that create direction and in charge of how we move. And that was it, basically. That was the journey. And as I began to teach it in COVID, suddenly I couldn't have people in my clinic, so I took everything I knew, put it into a system, because people had to change their mindset. They suddenly couldn't just come to clinics to have their pain fixed. So I took everything I knew and I turned it initially into a 7-week course where I taught people the biomechanics of their feet, of their hips and pelvis, then of their spine, then of their rib cage, then their shoulders and arms, then their neck, then their head and their jaw. And the outcome of this was literally mind blowing. And that was the foundation to where I am today, to the award that you spoke about and the book that I published recently. That's the journey.
Wow, that's a really fascinating journey, and all power to you, Victoria. The way you have, braved everything in your life, the different incidents in your life, the milestones, I would say, rather, that you came across, and today you are enabling people with biomechanics and helping them overcome. So,
Yeah.
it really brings me to understand, and for my listeners as well, for our listeners out here, to help them understand what exactly is biomechanics, because we have heard a lot of terminologies today in this era when we talk about
Yeah.
the healthcare, and a common
Yeah.
man just gets lost amongst these, the glossary world of these terms coming around in the healthcare domain. So if you can just ease out the meaning of biomechanics for our listeners.
Yeah. Okay, so I like to teach things in a way that a 10-year-old could understand them. Okay, it's like, let's look at biomechanics, not from the perspective of you need to be a major, brilliant sports coach or, a doctor. Let's just put that to one side for a minute and come back to if you were a child, okay, do you know you have bones in your body?
Yep.
Yes, pretty much. Everyone's like, yeah, okay. Do those bones have to connect with other bones? And that connection area is called a joint. Are we
Yep.
there? Yeah. Okay. So if we suddenly just go off from the body for a minute and think of a car, okay? So we know the mechanics of a car is it has wheels, it has steering, it has pedals, okay? Now, if you have all those different parts and they are all aligned and engaged correctly, yeah, that car is going to move very, very smoothly. Okay. And by the way, it doesn't matter what fuel you put in that car, no matter what you eat, anything, nothing, doesn't matter, right? Because if those wheels and that steering and the suspension is not mechanically correct and aligned, it's not going to be a pleasant experience going for a journey in that car. Okay. So be it a car crash or be it that over time the car has rusted and just due to lack of attention, yeah, just it's decayed, right? We know that happens. So now let's come back to the body.
Mhm.
So our mechanics are the bones and joints, and of course all the muscles and other soft tissues that help to make those keep them in the correct place, yeah, and all of the connective tissue. But what happens is with biomechanics, most joints, not every joint, but most joints are designed to move in 3D. So we have 3 planes of movement. Okay, we have the backwards and forwards movement. So if I nod my head backwards and forwards, this is called sagittal plane. Okay, that is one plane of mechanics of the movement. Things, all your joints need to be able to move backwards and forwards. Okay. Then we have a second plane, which we call frontal plane. Okay. And that is if I send my head to one side or to the other side, we call it lateral flexion. Okay. That is another plane of movement that my joints should be able to do. And then we have the third plane, which is transverse, it's rotation. Okay. This is not difficult for anyone to understand. Okay.
Yep, yep,
It's
yep.
not difficult. All right.
Yes.
And your pelvis should be able to do this in isolation. Your rib cage should be able to do this in isolation. Your skull should be able to do this in isolation. And then what I would say is those movements should be being led by the hinges, which are by the joints. Okay, so imagine trying to drive a car or move a car forwards. If you're pushing it forwards without turning on the engine and allowing the wheels to move.
Hmm.
Okay, that's not happening. So then people are just trying to push it forward. This is basically what's happening in a lot of joints in people's bodies because the muscles are trying to move the bones and the joints instead of the joints triggering, being the hinges that they are, the movement of the muscles. My teacher Gary Ward would have always said joints act, muscles react. Now we live in a world where a lot of people see that in reverse. They do not understand it. Some people don't even want to believe it's true. Okay, and until they feel it, they might not believe it's true. So biomechanics is basically about the aligned movement of every joint in your body. And then it gets slightly more complex because then it's about the timing of how all those joints are moving in relationship with each other. Okay. And that's more of the level 2 of what I teach. We teach the cogs of then how all these different joints are designed to move in timing with each other. Your muscles will switch on and off. Muscles basically in pairs are agonists and antagonists. So for example, the hamstrings with the quads or something, they are designed to work in partnership, usually with each other. When joints do not work correctly,
Mhm.
the muscles can't switch on and off correctly.
Yep.
Okay, so there is also that aspect of the relationship between it, we've got the alignment, we've got the movement of the joints in 3D, and we've got how that switches the muscles on and off. And then finally, but in a way far, well, most importantly, we have the way your center of mass, yeah, the gravity literally sinks down through your body to be supported by these structures.
Yep.
And because people get stuck, we'll talk more about why the mechanics go out of alignment, but because it gets stuck, then the center of mass doesn't kind of sink down the body correctly. And this then creates all kinds of chronic pain, disease, illness, and locks in all kinds of emotional trauma. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally, totally. That was very, very well explained, coming down to, as you rightly said, to a 10-year-old kid. So it's
Yeah.
very well explained, and I hope our listeners have been able to get a hold of it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, my system is not coming at biomechanics from a kind of sports perspective or from a medical perspective. My system comes from a perspective is of how do we teach the average human being who lives in their body about the body they live in, right? That's where I'm coming from.
Nice.
It's where that's what people need to know.
Yes, totally. And you mentioned about that, the tension in our joints could also be linked to the emotional tension we have in our bodies. So if you can, shed some light on that.
Okay, so there's lots of research out there. I love to use the model of the polyvagal theory when I take this because obviously it's very endorsed and it's people understand about it. But if you look at something like the polyvagal theory, you can see you've got different parts of the nervous system. You've got the sympathetic nervous system, you've got the parasympathetic nervous system, and you've got the ventral vagal nervous system. So how do those systems actually sit in the structures of the body? Polyvagal, they talk about the ladder, yeah, the kind of autonomic nervous system and a ladder. So what we know to be true is that over many, many kind of millions of years, potentially as animal beings, we have evolved. And we have this sympathetic nervous system in our spinal column. Okay. It triggers mobilization. We need that. Yeah, we wouldn't get up in the morning without that. So we need to be able to move. We need to be able to be triggered. Unfortunately, what we also know to be true nowadays is that people are under stress for all kinds of reasons that are not life threatening, but are exhausting for the body to deal with.
Yep.
Okay. So that could be too much work. But it could even be I'm late for a meeting and I'm stuck at a red traffic light and I can't go. And so the body's, the extremities, the arms and the legs have this adrenaline going, but the body isn't able, the joints, the muscles, the bones aren't able to activate that energy. So it kind of implodes. So that is our sympathetic mobilization. We then have our parasympathetic, which is the life threat, or isn't everything in the world wonderful? Let's create. It's kind of those two extremes. And basically what happens is the parasympathetic ideally would connect with the ventral vagal system, which is the heart, that lovely safe and social feeling. You and I at the moment, we're looking at each other, we're smiling, there's no threat. This is, just isn't this lovely? Yeah, we're not in a war zone, we're here having a really nice conversation. Okay, so we're reassured at this moment, so long as we're not thinking, oh my God, I need to go in like 5 minutes to get somewhere. At the moment, our ventral vagal system is just really happy and the body can find a homeostasis and a lovely flow. Our heartbeat, is pretty normal.
Yep.
If, however, we were in life threat right now, it would be very, very different. I would probably be struggling to think about what I'm meant to be talking about with you. My mind would be elsewhere. And then we have to translate all of that into the structures of the body. What actually happens? Okay, so when we're feeling happy, okay, being in the body is quite nice, so long as we're not in physical pain. We might not be conscious, we're definitely not conscious of what our different systems are doing, but our body isn't really giving us a hard time. It's an okay place to hang out. Okay, the heart is beating, the muscles are soft, smiling is like the best relaxant for the whole body. So we're good. But what happens is if the sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive, this is bang, bang in the middle of the rib cage, all the thoracic vertebrae, which are the vertebrae that connect the ribs. Yeah, there's this adrenaline going on. And if it's stress and fear, there's a kind of tightness and lockdown that happens in the rib cage. Now, inside the rib cage, I love to call it the treasure chest. Yeah, because inside the rib cage, you have your heart, you have your lungs, you've got your digestive tract coming down, you've got your liver and other organs, and you've just got so much going on, lots of connective tissue, lots of muscles, and of course the ribs and tiny muscles between the ribs. There's just so much going on in there. So if I'm suddenly very scared, yeah, and I'm either in fight, which is like, right, let's tense everything and punch someone's lights out, or I could be in flight, so then I'm running. Yeah, the rib cage just gets completely contracted. That's what I see. Now, that's one version of that. Another thing could be I've just had the most awful shock or experience because someone's just died. Okay, at that point, the rib cage will usually kind of collapse forward. The scapulars, the shoulder blades will kind of spread. And then there's this kind of internal rotation, shoulders sink down, and a compression starts on the diaphragm and on all the organs. The back of my neck will probably contract and my head will fall forward. And then I am trying to hold myself up when actually this emotional state has collapsed the rib cage. Okay, so and when I say collapse, it is not always just in the sagittal plane, the backwards and forwards. Collapse could be one side collapses more than the other in frontal plane. And also, if I'm emotionally really, I just want to get away from how I feel or something like that, or it could be any reason, there could be a rotation as well. So the collapse could be happening in 3D, where all of those bones, joints, and then everything attached to them and contained within them are then under this pressure of collapse. We then move down to the pelvis. And if there is life threat, yeah, if there is conflict, if there is terror about something, we know that the dorsal vagal system, we go into this kind of numbness. Okay, we just can't tolerate the feelings of stress, and actually we don't have the energy for it. So our base of support, the base of our spine and our pelvic bowl, just kind of give way. We have a psoas muscle which goes from the base of the rib cage to the top of the thigh bones, yeah, and this whole collapse goes on. So at this point the pelvic bowl is just under far too much pressure. What happens with a lot of people, and doctors train with me. I had one recently training with me going, Victoria, no one has ever taught me this. But what actually happens is, for many people, the rib cage sinks into the pelvis. Literally, the floating ribs sink down into the pelvis, and then the pelvis can't move properly if it tried. So then we have a digestive system in there. We have, our urine system in there. We have just everything that's down there, our reproductive system, everything. And again, in the pelvis, it could be compressed backward in the sagittal plane, in the frontal plane, and in the transverse plane. Okay. And then, so that's out of alignment. And then what we also have is all of this area of the body trying to hold itself up, because there's an utter disconnect with the mechanics of the feet, with what we call suspension, which is when they flatten and spread, and then propulsion, which is when we get an arch in our foot, a supinated foot. So we'll talk about that more. So this is a car crash. It's a total car crash in terms of the structures in the body. And so everyone else, most practices, most therapists, most doctors are busy trying to deal with the invalid and symptoms of the car crash, instead of coming in and going, okay, if this was a wobbly table, if everything was wobbling, where are you going to go to start to resolve that wobbly table, when all the plates and the salt and pepper and everything's everywhere? Where are you going to go to? Where do we all go to? The feet, the foundation, the structures that's supporting everything.
Yep.
And, the magic of what we're doing here is how simple it is. But the biggest challenge of what we're doing here is people's belief systems that it could actually be that simple. And that's where we're at right now.
Amazing, amazing. That's a very elaborate and a very easy way to understand things. And you rightly, concluded your answer at a place where you talked about belief system. But I also believe that cultural and the societal norms also have a role to play in our overall posture and movement patterns. So if you can, just help us understand the relation between our belief systems, our culture, our societal norms in the way we move and the way we have our posture, body's posture.
Yeah, okay. So this is very interesting, because I would add something else to that as well. That in
Mhm.
different parts of the world and different societies, people's bodies have over time evolved differently. They have different shapes. There are, like, if you look in countries like Mexico and South America, you will see much broader shaped skeletons, whereas, in other societies, you'll see much bigger, taller skeletons. So I'm always going to bring you back to the shape, size, and structure of the skeleton, of the internal structures. I always have to bring you back to the internal environment as well as the external environment. How have people evolved internally? Look at the pathologies that are will show up more in some cultures than other cultures, which, from my perspective, I hope as the years go by, I can do more and more research into this. But from my perspective, is very much about the shape, size, and proportion of the internal structures in different societies and cultures. Okay, so that, I cannot stress enough, is a very, very important thing to just keep an eye on. Where are you from? What is the history, and how have your the bones of your culture, the bones of who you are. How have they evolved? Yeah, and why have they evolved that way? Yeah, both because of internal experiences and what's going on externally in your environment. So then, obviously, we've just got the obvious, haven't we? That many people are sitting at desks. Like right now, you and I are having this conversation, staring at a screen to look at each other. We're not going for a nice walk. Yeah, having this conversation, which our body would far more enjoy in terms of movement and mechanics.
Yep.
So we have that, don't we? For a start, everyone's sitting down, I would say a lot more. We then have, the way people, what are they doing when they're sitting down? Most people have this head forward posture, a collapse with the upper body. So we have all of that going on. Mobile phones, we know all of this, don't we? So a lot is going to depend on, I wouldn't just say the culture and society, but what you personally do most of the time in your body. Yeah. How are you using your body? And also, I would say a lot has to do with the relationships you are having within whatever society you are. There are clear postures of, if you have someone who feels very powerful, very, very well off, very kind of okay, you will see in their embodiment. Yeah, obviously there are many embodiment teachers out there, but they're not necessarily bringing it back to the bones and the structure. You will see that. And, we are a walking, talking version of our life. Yeah, of what we are doing. Basically, the way we put one foot in front of the other is an example of the culture we live in, but also the family situation we live in and the work that we do. It's not something I have personally, as yet gone in and studied and studied. We just take a slow-mo video of how you walk and we can read so much about what you do from that.